First of all, I want to thank Chairman Enzi for his courtesy in allowing me to just take a few minutes to discuss an amendment, a bipartisan amendment that I will be offering on this bill. And it deals with what I think is going to be an enormous challenge this summer for the West, and that is dealing with this wildfire challenge and the prospect that we could literally have enormous fires, what are virtually infernos, throughout the West this summer. And I make that judgment, Mr. President, because recently I was home. I got a briefing, for example, in Medford, Oregon, where they told me it was the driest it had been for 25 years. And in Medford, when you get an update on the fires, and colleagues, also it's worth noting, nobody used to have a fire briefing in March. That was just unheard of. You'd have fire briefings well into the summer, but because fires are getting to be a year-round, occurrence, I was there in March, and the fire experts said, going to be very dry. And then when you look southward, Mr. President, to California, all you see is dry, dry, dry. And the fact is that as it gets drier and it gets hotter on the forest floor, if you have a lightning strike, which is certainly very common in rural America, all of a sudden you can have an inferno on your hands, and one that really knows no boundaries, that can affect private property owners, state lands, federal lands. We had a hearing in the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, an important hearing the other day, on the sportsman's bill, Mr. President, and I said, looks like a lot of good ideas here, bipartisan bill. Pretty hard to go hunting and fishing in the forest this summer if the forests are burning up. So what a bipartisan group of us from the West want to do, and I particularly want to commend our colleague, Senator Crapo of Idaho. He and I have teamed up on this effort. We have a large bipartisan coalition of senators who have joined us, and we want to fix the broken system of fighting wildfire in America. What happens today, Mr. President and colleagues, is the accounts for prevention get short shrift. In effect, the work that needs to be done with the smaller trees and thinning out the underbrush doesn't get the funding that is needed. And so what happens is, as a result of a lack of prevention, you have these bigger fires and you have to put them out. The accounts for dealing with fire suppression are also short of money. So what happens at that point is the agencies borrow from the prevention fund to put the fire out, and the problem just gets worse and worse and worse. So what Senator Crapo and I, with, as I've indicated, a large bipartisan coalition of senators are seeking to do is to end that kind of fire borrowing. And what we're proposing is that the biggest fires, perhaps the 1% of the fires that really turn into infernos, you would fight those, Mr. President, from the disaster fund, because they really are, in fact, disasters. And we have received an analysis from the budget officials indicating that this would really be a wash from a budgeting standpoint, because in effect, while you do spend a bit of money from the disaster fund putting out these infernos, you also generate some real savings from the prevention fund by not having as many fires in the first place. So, Mr. President, what our bipartisan amendment will do later, when we intend to offer it, is to give the Departments of Agriculture and Interior the opportunity to access the disaster funds for that 1% of the fires that really comes apart, that can really break a community apart. And it seems to me that Americans across the country who live in communities where there are these fires, they deserve to know that their homes and their lives are not going to be threatened needlessly. That's what we're able to prevent with this bipartisan amendment. And freeing up the Forest Service funds that our proposal will do will ensure that the natural resources agencies have the resources they need to improve forest health and fund the very preventive work that is needed to reduce the size and severity of future fires. We're going to be joined in this amendment, as I've indicated. Senator Crapo and I base it on our bipartisan bill. Senator Stabenow will be a sponsor, Senator Baldwin, I believe others will as well. But this is an important amendment, Mr. President, and it is an urgent amendment because we need to have this in place quickly so as to give the natural resources agencies and our communities the tools they need this summer. It's a real wake-up call, Mr. President, when you get a fire briefing in March. That's an indication that we have a very, very difficult fire season coming up, and this bipartisan amendment ensures that in a cost-effective way, we give our natural resources, the agencies, the tools they need to fight these infernos and protect our communities. Once again, Mr. President, I want to thank the distinguished chairman of the committee, Senator Enzi, for giving me this time, and I would yield back.